country in transition, and you see out a picture everywhere still, in everything, all the offices, everywhere you go, and all the currency. And no one knows what the final result of that will be, but it's a situation in flux. Okay, that's my history. Oh, I didn't do one thing, the conquest of Spain. I just want to finish that up, and then we'll move on to cultural things. I do like history, as you see. So, we talked about the Shiite issue up to the problem in Karbala. We'll go back to the Shiites after we do the Spanish situation. In Spain, as I told you, the Arab conquest went quickly, and it took all these areas, but it left this area unconquered. And over a century or two, this area coalesced again into a troublesome area. As the Arab tribesmen and others squabbled in Spain, some of the armies, as you know, got as far north as Tours. The French now call that Battle Poitiers. It's a field in between these two towns in central France called Tours and Poitiers. That's where the battle was fought in 732. And so people say that was the end of Arab progress in that part of the world, the defeat by Charles Martel of the Arabs at the Battle of Tours or Poitiers in 732. That's 100 years after the Prophet died. The Prophet died in 632. So in 100 years they got that far. India in the east, France in the west, right? So yeah, sit over there, that's fine. So, this Battle of Tours has been celebrated in Western lore, as I told you, in human history. If the brave Frankish knights had not triumphed at Tours, the minaret would today be sounding from Oxford spires. Well, you know, I don't think it, as I told you, it ever would have happened. And I told you the parenthesis that the culture of Europe switched to the north because basically the Arabs took over the control of the Mediterranean for a long period of time until the modern world. And the commerce was interrupted on the Mediterranean, had to be penetrated again by the Venetians later on. The Crusades were somewhat about that too. All these things are somewhat connected. But in Spain, we told you that you got the Umayyad Caliphate came in with Abd al-Rahman I. Around 755. When he escaped the Abbasid retribution on all the previous Umayyads, and most of them were wiped out, their graveyards overturned in Syria, the center of the Islamic world moved to Baghdad. We know that Abd al-Rahman, whose mother was a Berber, was smuggled across North Africa, presented to the Spanish Arab tribesmen as a possible leader. They had been rent by division and squabbling, and particularly the Qais Khal, the feud that we got in that one story was very strong. They imported it wherever they went as tribesmen. Some cities said they were Khals, some Qais. Some of the Ottoman emperors or caliphs were Qais, some were Khal. It was a very, deleterious thing. I read an account of Palestine backed by a British administrator in the middle part of the 20th century, the 1920s or 30s. And he was doing a census of towns in Palestine. He said, even in Palestine in the 1930s and so, where he was doing his censuses, the villages were identifying as Qais or Khal. Still, 1,000 years later, more than 1,000 years later, you could still find in these vestiges of Qais Khal feuding going on, even in the villages in Palestine. That was the bird's nest story, you recall that we read, where Kulai Khal made a vow over a bird's nest. and he was resisted by someone from Mackay's background who trampled on, whose client trampled on the Persians. That was the poet's view of the beginning of the dispute. Anyway, it was very enduring, and it carried into Spain. Well, but the Umayyads were very successful in Spain, and they carried on for another 300 years in Spain. They beautified Spain, had very beautiful cities there. Their capital was Cordoba. If you've ever been to Cordoba, you'll see it's a very beautiful place. There's huge minaret still in Seville. And of course, Granada is one of the most beautiful cities in Spain to the present day. All these cities were part of Islamic control. And Granada was the last one to fall in the 1400s. But it's still totally Islamic city. And if you, haven't you been to Cordoba? Anybody? Well, if you go to Cordoba, the main thing there is the Umayyad Mosque. It's still there. It's been turned into a church. It's been made totally garish with horrible paintings and things that wouldn't have existed in the mosque. But if you ignore all the horrible paintings of bloody crucifixions and things like that, and just look at the beautiful architecture of this splendid Muslim mosque, you can get some idea of the beauty that Cordoba had once been. So Cordoba was a really totally beautiful Islamic city. What happened? Well, they carried on into the 1000s fairly successfully, but things started to fall apart in the 1000s. The Crusades had started to get going. The Crusades were actually pronounced first in Spain before they were in the Middle East. Crusading armies went into northern Spain. And the Spanish started to reconquer parts of Spain. And this undermined the Umayyad Caliphate too. And the big event in Spain was in 1085, Toledo. So in other words, they'd gotten all the way down to there by 1085. It took them 300 years to get back down to there. The Christians, that is. So basically all that was left for the Muslims was these areas along here. And then you may have seen, if you've watched movies, late night shows about El Cid. He was an Islamic hero, but he switched sides always. Sometimes he was on the Christian side, sometimes he was on the Arab side, but all that is about the warfare in this area. It was about the 1200s. So this was moving down into this area. After about 1250, all that was left was Granada. And then when Ferdinand and Isabella got together and marshaled their forces, they took the rest in